Sometimes I like a nice concentric ring rosette, as you see in this guitar here. And especially in guitars like this, or one that I've barely started here, um, these are total experiments. And you have to kind of ride a fence, I guess. Do you want to put an awful lot of work into a rosette and ornamentation around the guitar uh, when you don't even know for sure whether you're going to have a really good guitar when you get done or not? And these two instruments are such that I really don't know. So I'd like to have something nice in them. I don't want to just throw them together. But I thought maybe a nice concentric ring rosette would be appropriate. It looks nice enough and it's not too tough to make. Now, you can inlay that rosette, uh, piece at a time, I suppose, gather up purfling pieces and squeeze them into a channel. That can certainly be done. But I like this rosette to be a little bit more bold. That is, each segment in it, I want to be more bold than just pieces of purfling. So I made up a bunch of strips that range around 45 thousandths of an inch thick. I think you could probably, you could mix thickness, but I'm thinking that once you get to about 50 thousandths of an inch thick, you might be playing with fire to get these to bend. But experimentation will certainly bear out how far you can go with that. So I thought I'd share with you what I'm doing to make a concentric ring rosette in one piece, so that I'm not having to fight bending all of these chunks around a pre-cut channel. So the first thing I did was to make up a disc like this. And of course, the diameter of that disc represents the inner diameter of the rosette that you're trying to make. Um, and I mounted it on a block just so that I'd have a surface to guide myself with while I'm bending. And then I put a cleat underneath it so that I could hold it all still in a vise and work with it. I made up my strips of veneer like so. Here's my selection. You could use anything you want, of course. And I put those together, and I also made myself a metal strip. This is just a scrap piece of aluminum coil stock. You could use any thin sheet metal, I suppose. And the object of this is put a little hook in it so that I can hook it around this screw that I've installed. And I'm going to put my materials in here. And that screw is positioned so that it's fairly tight. And the object of the game here, of course, is to bend that around. Now, whether or not that's going to bend dry is pretty doubtful. That's pretty thick stock, and even if you tried to bend it dry, it's not going to stay there unless you keep it there for, I don't know, 2-3 weeks maybe. So the question now is, well, how do you bend it? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I take my strips and I'm going to wet them to help make that bend. And I'm going to be fairly generous with the amount of water I put on these because it'll all work out in the end. So we just sandwich those back together. You also have to keep in mind that each strip, as you move away from that circle, is a little bit longer than the previous one. I did some guesswork on that. I tried some calculations, and they're doable, but it became time consuming and frustrating. And I said, well, that's enough of that. I'm also going to move away from here quickly and grab some gloves because we're going to apply some heat. And I'm not interested in scorching or scalding my fingers. So I'm just going to start applying heat here. Really not even positive how well this is going to work. I made my disc at such a height that it matches the purfling strips, the width of those. So I'm just starting to pull this around. Now, one of the things that I found, I did this before and it was a failure. One of the strips had too much run out in it, and it just didn't want to make that bend, and it cracked in a couple of places. And I also found that you don't want to just pull it around. You really want to put some stress on it to keep it against that cylinder. I wish in this case I had both hands free. It would be a little easier to bend this. Have someone else control the heat while you do the bending. But as you can see, it seems to be progressing nicely. I'm not seeing any fracturing. I'm not hearing anything. I think an adequate amount of heat is important here in order to get the bend to be consistent. You know, the cylinder will certainly help control that, but even heat is going to be your friend. And of course, the purpose of that metal strip is to bring to support that outer strip. So I've switched hands here, and I'm going to continue the last part of the bend. And pretty soon I'm just going to have to go for it. And I think that's right about now. And it's come in quite nicely. Now I'm going to bend that tab back just to get it out of the way. And now what I'm going to do is put this large hose clamp right over this thing. And I've got my cordless drill rigged up so that I can draw that in quickly. Keeping your fingers out of it, of course. And I'm not afraid to put some real pressure on that, or some real tension, I should say, to bring that in nice and tight. All right, now, there it is. We're going to let that cool for quite a while, and I'm going to come back because once I take this apart, even when that cools, of course, that's likely to spring open by quite a bit, and that's all right. I'm going to come back. I'm going to take the hose clamp off, and I'm going to show you the next step that I went through with the previous one, which worked pretty well. Maybe this one will work better, and show you how we can solidify this thing right up and make it nice and just about ready to install in a little while. I took this out of the clamp, and as you can see, these layers have splayed out a fair amount. I probably could have left them in longer or maybe heated them a little more, but as you can see what I'm doing now, I took them apart, and I don't mind that they splayed out so much because I'm applying white glue to each one of these strips. And I'm going to put it right back in there and glue this thing up, and it's going to make a nice solid ring out of it. So just getting my glue spread there as I need it, and we'll put it right back in the press. I'm using white glue because it's a little more flexible. If I needed to change its shape ever so slightly when I install it, this stuff will flex a little bit more. So here we go. I'm gathering all of these right back together and putting them right back in the press as original, pulling them around, and we're back in with our hose clamp. Now, I did one of these before. I guess I showed it to you, and I managed to keep the clamp on this. Instead of using white glue or conventional wood glue, I completed it with super glue, which worked. It works very well, but of course super glue is pretty costly, if that matters. But the propensity for it to stick to the clamp is quite high, and so I had to be very careful in that regard. I was not concerned about the cylinder because I waxed the daylights out of it. That did help for sure. but still, I think this particular method is a little bit better. Um, and as you can see, maintaining control over it wasn't all that difficult. And I think it's pulled in nicely. If I bring you over here a little closer, I think you can see the results seem adequate. So we'll pull that out of the clamp in another hour and a half and see what we've got. We should have pretty much what I'm looking for. It's been about 2 hours since I put this thing in here with the glue in it, and I probably should leave it a little bit longer, but I got so excited about making this video that I'm going to open it up right now anyway. You ever do that where you get excited about doing something and you really go faster than you should, kind of maybe jump the gun a little bit? Probably not good judgment, but what the hell. So I'm taking the hose clamp off, and that piece of metal is going to probably snap out of there a little. And it has released. Had plenty of wax down in there. And there it is. Now it's very rough, of course, but I have a remedy for that. I'm going to bring you up here. Just move the camera for now. And get this block out of the way. I have a piece of aluminum here, a nice piece of 1/4-inch aluminum plate, but you could use a piece of tile or, MDF or anything that's good and flat. And all I'm going to do with this thing now, because it's a little bit rough, is I'm just going to take this and flatten out that surface. So that's going to take a couple of minutes. There's a little ways to go there. And I'm not going to waste your time doing it all on camera, even if I pick up the speed of the film. But I'm thinking, you may be asking, why did I make this so deep when if I only need to make a rosette, one rosette, and there's a reason. First of all, by making it deeper, I have a lot more control over the pieces. They're larger, so they're easier to handle. And I guess if you only wanted one rosette, you could toss the rest if you really wanted to. But there's an advantage to this, because you can make a few rosettes out of this. And momentarily, after I get this thing scraped clean and flattened up, I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. Well, I set my rosette on this scrap of plywood, and I traced it. And I did that in such a way that the bottom edge of this piece of plywood and that ring coincide. I want those right together. And I traced it so that I could see where to put double face tape. And I'm just going to double face tape this right down on there. That's all I need. Now, don't be cheap with your double face tape, because you really want to get a fair grip on this for your own safety. And I'll take you over and show you what we do next. I set up my bandsaw, raised the guide up to accommodate this piece of plywood, and I've set my rip fence. And this is very simple, because I've got a 3/4-inch piece of plywood, so I just set up a distance between the piece of plywood and the blade that represents the depth of the rosette, and I gave myself a 1/16 of an inch. It doesn't need to be that deep. Probably 60 thousandths is all you need. But I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room here, and it's just that easy. Now I'm going to cut this thing off. And as you can see, the reason that I tape this on here is to hold it still. Now, if you're an experienced bandsaw operator, I'm preaching to the choir, you know that trying to cut freehand any sort of a cylinder is just plain suicide, both to the bandsaw and, more importantly, your hands. But by fastening this rosette piece to this plywood, now I've got it where the bandsaw can't roll it out of my hands, and we should be able to make a good safe cut. So you just want to make sure you're holding it securely against the fence. Obviously, keep your hands out of the center of the circle, and we'll give it a try. And there we have our rosette ring. So with a little bit of judicious work here with a single edge blade, I can get this thing to separate pretty easily. And we get the tape off there. And there you can see we have a nice rosette. Now, I still have this, and this is quite nice because now I can take this, I can put it back on my aluminum plate that I showed you before, which by the way just had 80 grit PSA sanding abrasives stuck on it. I can go back and refine this again if I feel I need to. See, there's a little bit of swarf hanging here and there. You could clean that up, set this back up, and go right back over to your bandsaw and slice off as many of these as you have available, and then you got a few of them. So there's my rosette ring, and it's going to go on this here experimental guitar. Should be easy to put in, quick. Instead of spending hours to do a rosette on a guitar that I'm not certain about, come up with an easy way. Well, I don't know if this has been terribly instructive for anybody, but if it gives you some ideas about how you might go about something similar, or gives you the idea that you could make up a short pipe of these things, so to speak, and then cut a few of them off for future use, might be something you can use. Now, I know somebody's going to ask in the comments, what experiment is this one? I have never made a ladder brace guitar, and I don't know why I'm doing it, except a couple of issues ago, there was a really nice article in the Guild of American Luthiers magazine about ladder brace guitars, and it's going to sound different, and I don't know what that's going to be like. I don't know what that difference is. It's guesswork all the way through, but I'm going to have fun with it. And a lot of those old ladder brace guitars, you know, they weren't all that ornate in the first place. Sometimes they had stencils on them, you know, the cheap Stellas and whatnot. But going to give this one a try, see what we get out of it. So Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luthier, thanks for watching. Please put a like on the video and subscribe to my channel if you care to do that. See you next time.